Well, welcome everyone to the latest PreSales Collective webinar, where we're going to be talking about how it takes a village to close a deal. My name's Rishi Kapoor. Um, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm your host tonight. If you're in the UK, it's quite unique that we have an all British panel. I have to just say that. But it's evening here in the UK, and it's first thing in the morning in the US. And yeah, thank you for joining us anyway. It's going to be a really interesting and a great topic today. I'm very excited. We've got a stellar cast panel here, and they'll be introducing themselves in a moment. So hopefully this is going to work and we are live. So here's the agenda. And just want to welcome you all to the PreSales Collective. And we're going to be talking about how it takes a village to close a deal today. So how to work effectively across multiple internal teams. And then we've got an interesting topic here, as you can see, and then we're going to get interactive with the Q&A, and we'll have a summary. Now, you have to bear with me. This is the first time I'm being a host, but apparently we've got a poll coming up right now. So to start off, please go ahead and answer this question. So what best describes your current role? Let's get interactive, everyone. Don't be shy. We've got the Q&A box. We've got the chat. I think this poll will stay on for a few moments or a minute. Okay, so thank you for filling in that poll. Want to thank you all for making the PreSales Collective possible. The PreSales Collective wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the members. Globally, I think we've got over 25,000 members now, which is absolutely amazing. I think we've got an international audience today as well, so that's brilliant. So thank you. How to get the most of today's webinar. So we're very keen for you all to be interactive about this topic. I'm pretty sure every one of you has an opinion and a thought around this. So please make use of the Q&A function within your Zoom window. Be active in the chat as well. I think the chat's on fire already. So that's pretty good to see. There's some familiar names on the chat. Now, I want to open up introductions to our stellar panel. So I'm Rishi Kapoor. I'm a pre-sales leader in the UK. I manage a Benelux and Nordics sales engineering team at Ultrix. And I want to open up introductions to everyone else. So maybe we can start off with yourself, Elizabeth.
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabethe Lakes, and I am a director of solution consulting, and I cover Europe at a company called Forder. I'm based in the UK, and I've been in pre-sales for, I think, 11 years now. I'm very happy to be here and discuss this topic.
What about yourself, Paul?
Yeah, hi, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name's Paul Harris, and I'm a principal solution architect at a company called Loftware, part of the pre-sales leadership team. I'm really kind of focused on quite a lot of internal transformation and the kind of, well, especially pertinent today, how we can work better across the whole company. I'm based also in the UK on the South Coast, and I've been in pre-sales for around 4 years, and I've seen an awful lot of change in that time. I'm really kind of excited to be part of this panel today.
Thank you. And David, over to you.
Yeah, last but not least, I am indeed your final panelist from the UK, so an all-British panel, as Rishi said. I'm currently Regional VP of Sales Engineering at Seismic Software, based in London, and I've been in pre-sales for about 7 years now, about 4 years at Seismic and then 3 years prior to that. And yeah, just really looking forward to getting stuck into the conversation.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take the slides down for the moment, so we can all see each other. So let's get the discussion going. So there's this whole concept of teaming, and teaming has become a bit of a buzzword within sales and pre-sales, or team selling recently. And really, I want to ask the panel to sort of tell me, what does this mean to you? So to me, for example, when it comes to teaming or team selling, where I am at the moment, it's all about getting all those SMEs involved. So whether it's like a solutions architect or someone from the products team or the value engineers, to actually help close those strategic deals. And talking from experience, I can't do it on my own as a sales engineer. So maybe let me open this out to yourself, Elizabeth, to start off with. So what does team selling mean to you?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to admit that I may not be the most up to date in terms of social media and things like this. So I don't really know what this word means in the buzzword sense. But when I hear the word teaming, I just think, like, as you say, when it comes to closing a deal, there's a huge list of people that have to be all aligned in order to get something closed. And that can include like pre-sales and post-sales and product team. And what teaming really means is that, well, at least doing it well, is that everybody has something that they're adding, something that they have uniquely that they can add value to that sale. And whether it's a leadership person who's adding executive presence, or a product person who's adding the technical expertise, everyone's kind of bringing their like unique value into a deal to help it close.
Yeah, there's some good points there. Thank you, Elizabeth. What about you, David? What's your thoughts on these sort of concepts and buzzwords at the moment?
Yeah, well, much like Elizabeth said, I think it's really about everybody having their own unique aspect that they can bring to a deal, right? And I think actually one of the teaming, what it means to me is actually that, as a sole pre-sales person, you don't have often all the answers. You can't possibly just ride along with your account executive and close a deal. It actually becomes quite difficult to do that, right? So one of the big skills I think in enterprise selling is actually to know who to bring in and when to bring them in and what they're going to add to your deal. And so for me, the concept of teaming is really actually the skill of knowing who in your organization can bring value at that moment and bringing that person in, like Elizabeth said, to add their own kind of unique viewpoint or their own kind of unique quality into a deal that you're working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good points there. Thank you, David. And yourself, Paul, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would agree with everything Elizabeth and David have said. And I think the only other way that I would maybe think about it is that, take the analogy of perhaps you're being like, if you think of a singer up on stage, right? You're seeing that one individual person. And we're often that person who is on stage, in lights, everyone's looking at. But the teaming and the team selling is everyone who that person is relying on, who we go to, who's really kind of helping us. So it's the people making sure that everything happens on time. It's the people getting us there. It's the people kind of giving us that strong foundation that are enabling us to then go out and sell really successfully. So I don't know if team selling is necessarily, for me anyway, something that's so new, because I feel like we've always, in enterprise sales, it's always had to be a team to be really successful. But I do feel like we are starting to acknowledge maybe more that actually, it is a team effort, and you do need to be aware that there are going to be people who are going to play a different role in that sale, depending upon what their role is in your organization. And also that you need to really be able to communicate with them well so that you're able to get get that value and get that information that you need when you need it.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's all of these points are really vital when we want to work strategically with our customers and when we're talking about selling to the enterprise, I think. So thank you for that.
I love the analogy of the singer on stage, Paul. That was great. It's a good one. We're in pre-sales, we love analogies and stories that illustrate things. So that was a really good one.
Yeah, definitely. We're all rock stars anyway, right? So yeah, I think everyone will agree. Yeah, the pre-sales professional and the SEs definitely rock stars on the deals. As well as the AEs, of course. Yeah. It's
Backup singers.
they're the backup singers.
Someone's going to be the roadie, right? Someone's going to make sure that that you're well fed and that nothing if the mic stand falls over, they're going to come and pick it up for you.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, when I first started off as an SE, I wanted to or felt that I had to do everything from a technical perspective to progress the specific deal or sales cycle. Personally, for me, that was quite overwhelming. But now where I am at the moment, we've got this concept of bringing the village along as part of the sales cycle or like the deal to truly be able to work strategically for our prospects or customers. And really, I've got a question around how do you bring the village along when you're working strategically on your deals? And let me start off with Paul. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think this is interesting because we've heard maybe historically about some companies quite literally bringing the village or bringing a busload of people to the sale, and I think that's not what this means to me, right? This isn't about turning up with everybody from your organization to go and present, but it's about thinking about a village, and that's a very much everyone has their own specialist skills. Everyone has a function, and in order for everyone else to be successful, you need to be able to work together. And I think bringing the village is about, for me as an SC, and when I'm working with prospects or working on a deal, looking at the challenge holistically. Okay, what's the solution I have to provide, and what do I know? What can I answer? What questions can I answer? But then kind of looking and going, well, actually, where do I need some help? And then starting to identify from the areas that I'm going, well, I know I need to do this. I need to show that we can solve this particular issue, but I'm not the person who's going to have that answer. So who is that person? And, quite often I'll go and I might speak to one of my colleagues in pre-sales, or if I have a contact in product management or in development, I might speak to them. But I think it is really about trying to understand the problem you're trying to solve, and then going and finding that right person that is going to have the answer and is going to be able to give you the toolkit to really solve that problem.
And what do you think on that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think what's really fun about being in pre-sales is that you have these touch points and similarities, and you can bridge the gap between all different parts of the organization. So like Paul was mentioning, that if you are challenged with something, you need something from a different team. I think it was said on a previous Leadership Next conference that we know more about sales than product, and we know more about product than sales. And so we can always be the person who kind of brings in who we need to serve a certain function in the sales cycle. So I think that's one of the unique things about being in pre-sales, is that you get to have these connections with different teams and kind of be the connective tissue between everybody on the deal.
Yeah, I would agree with you both actually. So when I started off as an SE, I thought I was selfish to actually get the specialists on board to help me close my deals, but then I realized that actually that was the right thing to do anyway. And I think it's only recently, maybe in my opinion, that we're starting to realize that the pre-sales professional is the glue that brings in products, value engineers, the architecture team, marketing. I think the pre-sales collective have got that key slide, which really shows that we are in the middle. And and it's a little bit shocking that still we need to reiterate that out there in our industry. So thanks for your thoughts, Paul and Elizabeth. I just want to remind everyone that we're going to have an audience Q&A later on in this session, so please don't be shy and ask whatever questions you want on this topic in the Q&A box. So David, I've got a question for you. Earlier on, I mentioned that I actually, I naively assumed when I started off as an SE that I felt as if I need to do everything on that deal, for example. Do you agree that the sales engineer should be doing that, or should we branch out to various SMEs or the village, so to speak? Like, what's your thoughts and experiences on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think the tendency of a sales engineer is to try to be a real expert on something, and so therefore it's hard for people who are in that role to relinquish a bit of control, because they want to be able to do everything. Ultimately, they want to help, right? It's interesting, in terms of my experience, and I joined the company Seismic, the company I'm at now, 4 years ago, and the product back then was a lot more straightforward, and it probably and more limited use cases. So it probably was fairly feasible for us, for a pre-sales person, for a sales engineer, to be a real expert on pretty much everything. I mean, we all kind of want to bring on some execs at the right time and things like that, but the biggest change that I've seen is that as the company grows, as the solution grows, as the use cases grow, you're starting to deal with more buying personas. You really have to embrace the fact that you're not going to really be able to get your arms around everything that you need to. You have to bring in other people. And like Paul said, it's not about bringing the village doesn't mean that you have to bring everyone onto the call, right? Like, if you're asking for the CTO, CEO every single call, like, that's not going to work. You have to be strategic, and you have to understand who can bring value to each conversation. And actually, that becomes the skill of the sales engineer, is coordinating that and coordinating all the different players within the organization who can help. At the end of the day, we're all going for the same thing, right? We're all trying to win new business. We're all trying to win new customers. And whoever you bring in to do that, it doesn't really matter. It's not a detriment on you that you don't know the answers, or you don't think you can present something in the right way. You're all striving for the same goal, and you shouldn't feel as a sales engineer that you're kind of deficient because you can't answer something, or you don't know how to present something.
Yeah, totally. And I think that sometimes we end up being the project managers from that perspective, to sort of coordinate all the right people at the right time, especially from a technical perspective on the deal. So thank you for that, David. So in Ultrix, we've recently made a shift. So previously, the village were part of different departments and orgs, but now we've got the solutions architecture team, we've got value selling, and various other parts of this village now within the SE org. And previously, they didn't really roll up to the CRO, or they weren't part of the go-to-market team. They were like part of a center of excellence, which, if I'm really honest, and I'll be quite open about it, tended to cause a bit of friction, because we would end up raising tickets and then waiting 3 or 4 weeks. And there wasn't really that sense of urgency and an understanding that we need these SMEs on this deal, and vice versa. So Elizabeth, what does this look like in your org at the moment, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. So at Forder, we're actually, I'd say the solutions consulting organization is relatively new and grown really, really fast. So we are starting to build out value engineering. We don't have this concept of solutions architecture yet, but in previous roles, I have experienced this, and this is all, I think it's dependent on a couple of things. First is like the product portfolio, the technology. If you have loads of products, then you might need to have like specialists for every product. Or if you have, I think like David mentioned earlier on Seismic, maybe you could have sort of generalists who could do it all, including the value engineering part of it and the solutions architecture part of it. So it's like partly about product and it's partly about, I think, the maturity of the organization. And you can kind of start with this, like just hiring some super talented solutions consulting and try to get them to do everything. And maybe that's the way to go when you're kind of a small and agile organization. You need to be able to do everything. But as you grow, that's kind of the benefit, is that you can have people start specializing in things and having a dedicated value engineering team. But like you mentioned, I absolutely think they belong in the go-to-market team, and that's been my experience as well. And because they all seem to be like branches of flavors of pre-sales to me. That's maybe just I'm biased and that's how I see them, but that's my experience with those kind of other parts of pre-sales and working with them.
Yeah, there's some good points there, Elizabeth. Thank you. And I think it does depend on the maturity of the org. I've got a question for you, Paul, if you don't mind. In smaller orgs, what's your thoughts around this? Does the roles and responsibilities sit with the pre-sales IC, or is it sort of spread across the org as well?
So I'm going to kind of answer it and say I kind of think it's both. And Dave and Elizabeth have put some really good points across, right, in terms of that idea of going from a relatively small, focus in terms of what you can, and you can get your arms around, you can understand the full product, and you also understand the go-to-market strategy, and you also understand the value proposition. And particularly at Loftware, where we've grown quite significantly in the last couple of years, that's not something that I can kind of have anymore. And I say it's both, because you kind of need to, as an individual IC, you need to be able to pivot into these different kind of functions. You need to be able to be the technical expert. You need to be able to be the solution architect. You need to be able to do the value engineering. But that doesn't mean that you kind of have to do it all at once. And this is where I think, coming back to this idea of team selling, that's both about, bringing in people from maybe outside of the pre-sales org, but in a smaller organization with a still reasonably sized sort of pre-sales org, even though we haven't yet specialized out into sort of individualized roles. It might be that on a deal, I might bring in a colleague and say, right, on this deal, I'm going to run the value engineering initiative, right? I'm going to kind of hone in on that. That's going to be my focus. I'm going to really lean into the business side of this, and I'm going to let you kind of take the technical piece. On another deal, it might be the reverse. So I think it becomes, you are still more fluid in what you do. And what that means is it's great if you want to try a bit of everything out. And I think that's one of the really nice things about being in pre-sales in a smaller org, is you kind of get to try a bit of everything and find what suits. But I think it's also, you need to be willing still to wear more than one hat between different calls and different sort of stages of the opportunity, but also be aware that you don't know everything, and you can pull other people in as you need to.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. So I've got another question for you, Paul. Previously, it's taken time for the village to get involved, but now things are a lot simpler. Do you agree with this as well, then, generally, from that perspective?
Yes, I would. And I think that there's been a recognition of companies being like a village, in that it's an ecosystem that, everyone kind of relies on everyone else to be successful. And I think that historically, pre-sales are as guilty of this as anyone else in a sales role, of saying, if I don't sell them the thing, then no one's got a job. And it's like, okay, but if product don't design the product, I have nothing to sell. If development don't build it, I have nothing to demo. If post-sales don't go and implement it, then I don't have any customers who can be happy references. And I think it's become easier because we've in pre-sales, I think our role has become more prominent, and I think that's a big part of pre-sales collective. I think have done a lot of that. I think also as enterprise sales has become more complex. I think, there's maybe a recognition that, okay, we need to bring more people in. We can't just rely on one or two people to go and do everything. And as companies have realized that, it has become easier. They become more kind of willing to involve people who maybe historically were a little bit more reluctant to get involved. And it goes back again to that thing of, we're not asking you to come and join every call with a customer, but we're saying, hey, look, I really need your help with this really exciting opportunity. Can you give me that support? And we've become better at asking for it. And I think being better at asking means people then become more willing to help.
Yeah, and actually what I've learned is there's no shame in asking. Like I mentioned earlier, that I was quite selfish back in the day, where I would just get anyone and everyone involved who I think would be able to help. And I think that's really important.
But I'll be honest though, Rishi, I think in my experience, and there are people I've worked with who maybe from the outside might have seemed selfish, who are the ones who would just go and knock on everyone's door, but then they were the most successful salespeople.
Mm.
So I think that kind of willingness to go and involve people speaks for itself when you see people's results.
Yeah, and I think it's key that we've all mentioned this. It's getting the right people involved as well. So I know I've just said anyone and everyone, but it's trying to make sure that you get the specialists involved. So, for example, we've got solutions architects aligned to various regions. I know, David, you mentioned the other day to me, actually, or I'm pretty sure another pre-sales leader mentioned this as well, that SME groups are being set up within organizations, or are set up within organizations. So at Ultrix, we're moving down the road of generalists versus specialists. So we're starting to build SME groups. I had a question for you, David. What have you got any experience seeing those sort of groups where you're at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because that's something we're kind of grappling with at the moment, is moving from like a generalist model to maybe something more specialist. We're not quite there yet, but I think it's only a matter of time, right? You can't continue to grow a software company and have ever more solutions without kind of some level of specialization. Now, for some organizations, that might be verticalization. You go by industry. Some companies you might go by product line, that would be a good one as well. Or you might go for a combination, right? I mean, I'm sure the largest software companies have got kind of a matrix there of different industry solutions and different like product solutions. Whatever you choose, obviously you have to have somebody who's kind of I'll use an Americanism, even though there's 4 British people on the call. You have to like quarterback it, right? You have to be somebody's coordinating all that effort, because you might need to bring in 3 different people from the sales engineering org now. Now that could be an account exec who's just very good at that, but I think also the sales engineering team needs to organize themselves to make that happen. So still on the journey there, I think, at this point in our growth. But I do know, I have seen that in a lot of organizations, and the people who do it well are the most successful, because ultimately, if you're talking in an industry specific way, you're an expert in your product still, and you bring the right people onto the calls, it can only be more successful. And just a final point on that is also timing is really important, right? The timing of when you bring in specialist resources is very important, because if you just start throwing the CTO onto the second demo every single time, like, that's not going to have the right impact or the impact you hope it will, because it has to be done at the right moment. You bring in an architect to talk about integrations. Well, if you haven't even sort of sold the value yet, how is that going to happen, right? So the timing of when you do things, and not just throwing the whole kitchen sink at this thing, is very important as well.
Yeah, totally. And actually, I've got a follow-up on that for Elizabeth. When you or your team are like sort of running your deals to like achieve optimal customer success, how do you get your teams involved? Like timing is obviously quite important, but can you give an example of like how you work with the different teams and align them?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this particular topic because I believe that customer success is not just for CS, and that it starts with the sales cycle, and we are extremely pivotal part in, you can call it a handover. I know it's like people don't like to say that because it's not, you don't just like hand it and then you walk away. Um, but it's a struggle. I think every organization that I've worked at, it's not smooth. And the really important thing about it is actually just to have really good personal connections between these teams, because to in order to have like a shared goal, you have to understand how other people are incentivized, right? Like you have to understand what the goals of the post sales team are, and equally post sales needs to understand what the goals of the pre sales team are. And only when you kind of understand each other and your motivations can you align yourselves. And that's where it is difficult sometimes organizationally, is if those things are not connected, right? Like if salespeople, pre-sales people are not in any way incentivized to have a healthy handover, then it's very difficult to just like kind of rely on people and the goodness of their heart to do that effectively, when it's much easier to like close a deal, move on, and move to the next one if that's the way you're incentivized. So in my experience, really important to make sure that those goals are aligned, that it's in the best interest of the sales team to have a healthy handover and a successful customer. And equally that like this, the customer success team is in some way incentivized to get involved in closing deals. That doesn't mean, like, again, back to timing, not after like the second demo and the customer has a question about implementation. It's like, this is when you're hopefully have won from a technical perspective, or maybe you can get the post sales team to help you push something over the line, that there's like some continuity there, that everyone is on the same page, and hopefully like less need of just like a cold handoff. So that's how I feel about it. I could probably talk about it a lot more, but that's all I wanted to say for now about it.
No, and I completely agree, especially about the point of, bringing somebody, the right people from customer success in at the right time, because people want to know that they're going to be supported. Obviously, it's not just about the technology, it's about the people. Bringing the implementation team maybe, or some people from the implementation team who are going to make this happen for a customer in at the right moment in time can really help the conversation as well. They're part of the sales cycle. That's, again, maybe not their primary job, but that is a part of what they can help bring the value to the customer on. So I do think that's a good point, definitely.
And I'd also echo just the point around customer success. I think particularly in SaaS, customer success is everyone's success, and successful customers are happy customers. And we're not just selling a customer something and then they're walking off into the sunset and never to be seen again. We want them to be happy and we want them to be successful, because we want to retain them as a customer. We want them to to come back to buy more from us. And I completely, that starts in that first engagement with them, and doesn't ever end. And I agree with the handover thing. I think I like to see it as, I'm never taking anyone away from that team, I'm just adding to it. So it's like, right, we're kind of, we're getting down the path, and now we're going to add someone else, because now these people are going to come on board, and you start to build that team out, and you introduce more people in the village to that customer as they move along that journey. And you then stay there as that touch point. And I just think it's so important to do that. And I really, I love, and I could talk about that for a long time, but completely agree that,
I mean, it's funny, like, if you're if you're listening to this on the and you're in a SaaS company, two of the most important metrics in any SaaS company are going to be net retention and gross retention. How are you in the pre-sales team going to impact those two metrics? They're like incredibly important metrics for the company, right? It's not just about the new business, it's also about retaining it and growing it. So you should have some place in that, and thinking about what your place is in that is very important.
And I think what I found is actually introducing more and more of the village to the customer as the account team to the customer is really important, because the customer will feel supported. I think a couple of years ago, the post-sales team or customer success in where I am would get involved when the SC and the AE have closed the deal. And then it's like literally a post-sales function. But now what we've started to do is get them involved maybe 6 months before the deal closes, or a couple of weeks before the deal closes, to ensure that they've got that handover, but also they're not coming in cold, because the customer, it'll be very obvious to the customer, that, okay, you've got a new function now in the account team, and they don't even know what the customer's about, what the account's about. And I think that's really important. What you mentioned, Paul, and everyone, is getting everyone on board. So at Ultrix, we call it the Ultrix bus. It's probably another sort of a US phrase, maybe. I don't know. It's a US company. So yeah, it's not a bad thing now to have the bus, offload for the customer, I think. So David, I know you're quite passionate about this, and at Ultrix, we've got something called Voice of the Customer now, where essentially it's kind of like that connection between the SEs and the products team. From your perspective, how does sort of feedback from the field actually prove successful then for the products teams where you're at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, we've spoken a lot about like customer success and bringing, the technical aspects of to a deal and various different people who can help. But I think also the product team have a role to play here to make sure that deals are successful. But also there's a separate kind of concept there, which is that if there are issues with the product that you see during a sales cycle, you need to have a way to communicate that really effectively. And it's interesting because when you're a small company, you probably know all the product managers and you can just tell them directly, and you might even have like access to their shared document where they keep all their product ideas, and you can access it directly and things like that. As you scale up and get bigger, I mean, that just becomes impossible, right? So you have to think of a better way to do that and get kind of not just deal level support, but also larger product ideas that you see that keep coming up. So a really good way that we've kind of devised to do this is to have a monthly meeting with the product team to present what we see in deals, and basically present what we think are the most at-risk deals because of any product issues, and how we basically just track those against each opportunity record in our CRM, so that there is a kind of a value associated to each of those product deficiencies, if you like. And then the SE leadership team have a meeting a week before the meeting with product to basically collate our ideas. And it's a combination of the revenue at risk, but also the number of times that request has come up, because we're also conscious that it's not just the largest customers that might see something. It's maybe in our commercial team there's lots of requests for a certain feature and we just don't have it. So that sort of cadence and structure around presenting back to the product team is really, I would say, pretty important. And obviously the product management team have to take the process seriously, and they have to be willing to act on deals when they need to. But it also gets away from the kind of whoever shouts loudest to the product team gets what they want. There's actually some data behind it, there's some thought behind it, and it's been a really good process so far, I would say. So, I mean, I don't know if any of the other panelists have experience of that type of situation, but I think it's a pretty good way to get the product team involved in deal level discussions.
I don't have it, but I'm absolutely stealing it. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. And I will say that we do have monthly cadences with other teams like marketing. I think it's really, really key to sort of sync from that kind of side of it. But no, I think absolutely, I love the idea of having that open relationship and conversation with them. It just kind of strengthens that more. So I love it.
Yeah, but not just going in and saying, oh, it's the biggest deal of the quarter and you've got to fix this, otherwise it's never going to happen. And then they do it and the deal doesn't close, or they don't do it and the deal closes anyway, and you just lose the credibility. Like, you have to have some data and have a data-driven conversation, really.
Yeah, and I think I can imagine that regular cadence kind of helps to perhaps rationalize some of those discussions as well, right? Because you're not going in all excited and hot about this one big deal. You're thinking about it more steadily and kind of going in and going, right, let's look at the data and see
Yeah.
what
And
actually comes
another
out of
thing
it.
is you don't want to put the product team on the spot either. You know, you kind of don't want to say, look, the whole deal rides on this. Why can't you just do it? And then they make a promise they can't keep. And, it's very, you give them the list ahead of time so they can research like level of effort. Is this already on the roadmap somewhere? Like, is there a workaround? Is this impacted by another feature that we're building? Things like that. And they can come to that meeting with a much more thoughtful kind of input as well.
I think we can talk about this all day and all night, but I'm seeing loads of questions coming in from those who are online at the moment. So I'm going to read out some of these questions if you guys don't mind, and maybe I will nominate a question to one of you in the panel, if that's okay. So one of the questions just come through is how does the team drive pre-sales efforts to continue beyond the demo, driving close of sales opportunity? And I'll ask that one to Elizabeth. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm trying to relate this back to like the village and the team. I believe that pre-sales, obviously we're involved in the demo, and part of that being part of the demo and early opportunity is qualification. And I think that kind of sets the scene for the rest of the opportunity and where you go and where you bring people in. And we've talked a lot about timing, and when you're bringing people into an opportunity, what I always think about is like effectiveness and efficiency. And we can't bring everybody to every single meeting, and you shouldn't bring everyone to every single meeting. And you only have so many times you can call upon the CEO or like the CRO. You can't do that over and over again. So as you're like driving towards a close, like that's where you start gaining the credibility to say, hey, actually I do think this opportunity is solid enough that it merits this person's time. You can kind of start rationalizing the time that you're asking of people, because I think it was mentioned earlier, like, you don't want to bring a C-level to a second demo and then like the result is that it's a bunch of wasted time because those deals don't close. So I think that's the way that I think about progressing past demo and continuing to bring people in, is that it's like you're sort of firming up and getting more and more confident about that deal closure. And that's when you start bringing like people who, you want to value everyone's time. You're not just going to like bring people in just because it's an uncomfortable situation for you. You want to make sure that it is driving to a close, and that, even if you bring in someone from product way down the line to promise something that the company is comfortable promising, you want that deal to win and to be able to go back to that product manager or whatever and say, hey, thanks so much. Like, that was the reason we won the deal, not the other possible scenario, which is thanks for offering, but we lost that deal and I probably shouldn't have asked you for it in the first place.
So there's a question coming here around when and how do you decide to influence the other teams directly versus their management? So maybe David, you can give some thoughts on this, because you've just been speaking about how to influence the products teams.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we've been talking about how to bring the village, and it's great. But obviously, that those teams that you're trying to bring, you also have to understand they have their own incentives, right? They have their own like projects that they need to do, and they have other goals and other objectives. So I guess what the question is kind of alluding to is what do you do if you get pushback from another team and they're not willing to help? Well, I think you have to firstly explain the reasoning for why you need it, and be very clear about the commitment you want, the time you need, and what's in it for them. Why should they do this? And if I think, also to the question's point, that probably does start with the team's management. You want your pre-sales leader to be going to that team's management and explaining why it is you're asking for, the product team's time or the developers team's time. So I think once people see the results of it, then they will be more receptive to it. But that is obviously a chicken and egg situation. I think it's really just about explaining incentives and explaining why you need that person's time that is the most important. As Elizabeth said before, you can't help each other unless you both understand how you're incentivized and what your priorities are. So that would be my biggest tip there, I guess.
Thanks for that, David. Paul, got a question for you. One of the attendees is asking, how can I build my internal reputation so that people listen when I ask for help on a deal?
Okay, this is really interesting, and
it's a great question.
It's a really good question. And I think it kind of comes, reputation is an interesting way of putting it. I guess I would maybe think about it more in terms of your personal brand within your organization. So, who are you within your organization? When people see your name pop up on Teams or on Slack or in an email, what is that going to mean to you? And I think kind of to echo a lot of what Dave and Elizabeth were just saying, you have to be strategic about when you bring people in. And, if you want to become known as the person who, when you're going to them, you're asking because you really need that help, but that you're also going to kind of come armed with everything, with kind of, they're going to have questions. You're like, right, look, here, I've got the questions I know you're going to ask. I'm really willing to help you. Is there anything I can do to sort of support, you with that? I think that's it. You have to identify, and as Elizabeth was saying, how are they incentivized? What's beneficial to them? What are you kind of gonna give them they're gonna benefit from? And I think also, just having getting known, building your network internally, and whether that's doing that at social events, whether that's doing that at sales meetings, whether you're doing that when you're in your office, just trying to kind of get to know other people in the organization, even at a social level. They'll kind of get to know you on that personal level, and then they'll be more willing when you kind of come to them with a work question. And I say that as someone, I've had that very, very recently, as people who I met, at a social event. They were part of the professional services team. I'd never worked with them. I didn't have any direct experience, but I had that connection with them. And I had that sort of that rapport and that brand. And they're like, oh yeah, look, I know Paul. I know that, if he's coming to ask for something, he genuinely needs help. And he is going to acknowledge that help. And he's not going to, sort of take advantage of me giving him that help either. And I think that's what it's about. It's about that sort of reciprocal relationship that you have internally, and to earn and build that respect and that brand. And maybe a reputation for being a really great person who, when you bring people in, you help them, and then when you do go out and you win that deal, that you're acknowledging that support. And I think that's something that I see really well at Loftware, is when we win a deal, acknowledging everyone who helped win that. For those people who maybe are not in sales and customer facing roles, really calling them out, in those QBRs, and saying, I couldn't have done this without this person in product management. That means a lot to them, because they're getting that recognition from the senior leadership that they wouldn't maybe necessarily otherwise get from a name recognition perspective. So that's another kind of really, really great way of building that kind of respect internally.
Yeah, if I could add something, I really like this question, because I think for any individual contributor, this is something that, this is a great skill to build. Because if you ever look at any career ladder or whatever, if you want to get to the senior level, the principal level, even leadership, it's all about, cross-organizational collaboration. That's always a thing that you need to achieve. And it sounds sort of lofty and like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to do that. Well, it's being the person that people like to help. And the best, I think, one tip for doing that is get to know people before you need their help, right? Like, don't make it like the very first interaction that you have asking for something. It's better if you have that relationship first, because you know who really, like, who the key organizations that you're going to need to work with to be successful. So if you're starting at a new company or somebody new starts, like, you should just reach out and have a one-on-one with them first. Just like get to know them, then they'll know who you are and think of you as someone who is proactive about collaboration. So I think this is a really important skill for anybody to learn to progress their career, is all about how to be good at influencing and getting people to help you and getting people to work together.
Yeah, totally. I think there's some really useful opinions and views here from you all. So thank you for that. Thank you, David, as well. I saw that there's a live question as well in the Q&A box. So thank you for answering that question. I'm going to share my screen because this webinar and this event isn't possible without our sponsors. So just want to give a shout out to Reprise. They changed the way companies sell software, and thank you very much to our sponsors today. And we can talk about this topic all day long, all night long. So I'm very keen for us to continue this conversation through the various channels that the PreSales Collective offers. So whether that's the Slack channels or LinkedIn, I think it's a very prominent set of topics. So I'm quite keen for us all to keep that conversation going. But if my system actually works, I would like to know how do we do today? So you should have a poll that's going to be popping up on your screen right now. So it's really important for us to get your feedback. So please be honest and open. It really helps for us to make these webinars and these events even better for us in the PreSales Collective. So we'll just give you all a moment to answer some questions here. So around how valuable was today's content for you? It may be extremely valuable, or it might not be valuable at all. And what type of webinars do you want to see going forward and that you'll most likely attend? We'll just the poll is still up, so please cast your votes. Thank you for your feedback. And thank you for joining us. I want to say thank you to I'm calling the panel a stellar panel because they are a stellar panel. So thank you so much to Elizabeth, Paul, and David. It's an all British crew, even though Elizabeth has some American behind her as well, but it's very refreshing to see. And thank you all for attending as well. This topic is quite close to my heart, and I can imagine it is to everyone out there. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping that you'll keep the conversation going within the PreSales Collective. We're all here to help each other out. And also, hopefully you'll join us at our next event. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a great day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, everyone.